At my daughter's wedding, she whispered, "You're not my family anymore." And she asked me not to join the family photo. I stayed silent, and when she called her father-in-law my real father, I couldn't believe what she had done. 2 hours later, she lost control, and the consequences were impossible to stop. $25,000. All my retirement savings were folded inside this envelope, pressing against my chest pocket like a weight I couldn't ignore. The parking lot of the grand ballroom stretched before me, an ostentatious display of wealth that made my 15-year-old car look like a relic from another century. Luxury cars, imported brands, vehicles that cost more than I made in 2 years at the manufacturing plant. I sat behind the wheel, watching the elegantly dressed guests glide toward the entrance. Women in designer gowns, men in tailored suits that probably cost what I spent on groceries over 6 months. My own suit, the best I owned, suddenly felt cheap and ill-fitting. The envelope crinkled when I shifted. 6 months of 60-hour weeks, 6 months of skipped meals and canceled plans. All for this moment. Naomi's wedding day, my little girl's special day. Except she wasn't little anymore. 28 years old, a successful marketing career, marrying into a family with the kind of money I could never provide. Her husband's family owned half the downtown financial district. Randall Harrington, her future father-in-law, could probably buy my entire neighborhood without checking his bank balance. But I was her father. That had to count for something. I got out, straightening my tie one last time. The March air carried the scent of expensive flowers and the sound of string music from the ballroom's gardens. Other guests breezed past me with practiced ease, comfortable in this world of privilege. I followed at a distance, feeling like an imposter. The ballroom entrance shimmered with crystal chandeliers visible through tall windows. Valets in immaculate uniforms directed traffic. Everything shone with the kind of elegance that money could buy, the money that I had sacrificed to give Naomi the wedding she deserved. "Daddy?" I turned, my heart thumping at the familiar voice. Naomi stood at the entrance, radiant in her wedding dress. Silk and lace transformed her into something ethereal, a vision of matrimonial perfection. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to run into my arms after school. "Oh, you actually came." Her voice held no warmth or joy, just faint surprise, as if my presence was unexpected and slightly inconvenient. Before I could answer, she had already turned away. "Randall, Celeste!" Her voice instantly lit up, musical and affectionate. "Come meet my father." Randall approached with the confident stride of someone used to commanding. Tall, gray-haired, in a suit that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Celeste followed, elegant in navy blue, with a perfectly practiced smile. "Arthur, my friend." Randall's handshake was firm, his smile wide and empty. "How is retirement treating you? Must be quite an adjustment after the plant floor." The words hit like tiny needles. The plant floor. Not engineering, not manufacturing. The plant floor. As if I had spent 30 years pushing a broom instead of designing manufacturing systems that saved his friends' companies millions. "I've been doing well," I managed to say. "Congratulations on acquiring such a wonderful daughter." "Oh, we're the lucky ones," Celeste chimed in, her voice sweet as honey, with an underlying layer of steel. "Randall, look how sweet. Our new daughter has such a hard-working father." Hard-working, another diminutive word, reducing 3 decades of skilled labor to simple muscle and sweat. Naomi beamed at her, her face glowing with genuine affection. The kind of warmth she once had reserved for me. "Aren't they incredible, Daddy? They've been so generous, so welcoming. They understand what family really means." The emphasis on really cut deeper than Randall's casual condescension. I tried to take my daughter's hand, hoping for some connection, some trace of the bond. we once shared. She gently pulled back, maintaining her perfect bridal pose. We should head inside. The photographer wants to start the family photos before the ceremony. Family photos. The words should have filled me with anticipation. Instead, something cold settled in my stomach as I watched her take Randall and Celeste's arms, walking between them as if she belonged there, as if they were her true parents. I followed behind, forgotten, invisible. The envelope in my pocket felt heavier with every step. $25,000. My sacrifice, my gift, my desperate attempt to prove that I still mattered in my daughter's life. The ballroom interior took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on marble floors. Floral arrangements, taller than I was, filled every corner, their perfume almost overwhelming. Tables were draped in silk, chairs tied with ribbons that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. All paid for with my money, my retirement, my security, my future comfort, transformed into this display of luxury that impressed everyone but acknowledged no one. I was financing my own irrelevance. Magnificent, isn't it? A woman next to me sighed in admiration. The groom's family certainly knows how to celebrate. Your daughter is so fortunate. Fortunate, another word that felt wrong. Suggesting luck instead of love. Chance instead of choice. I nodded politely, unable to form words that wouldn't betray the growing emptiness in my chest. Naomi giggled at something Celeste whispered, the sound bright and musical. She had never laughed like that with me, not in years. Not since she had started climbing the social ladder that led her away from the daughters of laborers and toward respectability. The photographer was setting up near the altar, adjusting lights and testing angles. Marcus Jones, according to the contract I had signed, $2,000 for the wedding photography. Money I earned working double shifts while other men my age were learning to play golf. This way, please. A wedding coordinator guided me toward a side section. The bride's family seating is here. Family, singular. As if I were all that remained of Naomi's past. A relic to be politely accommodated but not celebrated. I took the designated seat, watching Randall place his hand protectively on Naomi's shoulder. The gesture was natural, comfortable, the way I used to guide her through crowds when she was little, before she decided that working-class love wasn't enough. That plant floor devotion couldn't compete with country club connections. The envelope crinkled again as I sat. $25,000, the price of admission to my own public rejection, bought with every hour of overtime I'd worked since their engagement announcement. Marcus began organizing his equipment, chatting easily with Randall's family. They responded with the casual confidence of people accustomed to being photographed, documented, and celebrated. Naomi shone under their attention, basking in the kind of social approval I had never been able to provide. "We'll start with the immediate family," Marcus announced, his voice echoing in the decorated space. "All relatives, please gather around the bride." I stood up, smoothing my suit jacket, preparing to take my place beside my daughter. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the formal acknowledgement of our bond, captured forever in wedding photographs that would hang in her home for generations. Naomi smiled brightly as Randall and Celeste flanked her. Wesley, her new husband, took his position with practiced ease. The groom's family formed a perfect circle around her, their expensive clothes and confident postures creating a portrait of success. I moved toward the group, my heart beating faster with anticipation. My steps felt lighter as I moved toward the photography area. Finally, the moment I had waited for, standing by Naomi, being recognized as her father. in front of everyone who mattered. The father of the bride photos that every wedding album contained. The images that would preserve our relationship for posterity. Marcus adjusted his camera settings, his professional eye scanning the group. Perfect lighting here. This is going to be beautiful. He looked up with a welcoming smile. All set. Let's capture this family moment. Randall and Celeste's family positioned themselves naturally around Naomi, their expensive clothing creating a cohesive image of elegance and success. Randall's hand rested proudly on his new daughter's shoulder. Celeste smiled with maternal satisfaction. Wesley stood confidently by his bride, secure in his place within this privileged circle. I stepped closer, anticipating my position in the arrangement. 28 years of raising Naomi alone, attending every school play and parent-teacher conference, working extra shifts to pay for dance lessons and college tuition, all leading to this moment of formal recognition. Actually, Naomi's voice cut through my approach like ice. I need to clarify something. She turned toward me, her expression shifting from radiant bride to something colder, more distant. The transformation happened so quickly that for a moment I thought I had imagined it. I'm sorry, Daddy, but you're not my family anymore. Her words resonated through the space with crystal clarity, reaching every guest within earshot. They are my real family now. Now the world moved beneath my feet. Not metaphorically, literally, the marble floor seemed to tilt. The crystal chandeliers became a blur. The expensive floral arrangements turned into a spinning kaleidoscope of confusion. 28 years of bedtime stories, school plays, graduations, tears, laughter, and shared father-daughter dreams, wiped out with one sentence, eliminated, declared null and void in front of strangers wearing $1,000 suits. Honey, maybe we shouldn't. Wesley's voice had a faint note of protest, his discomfort visible, even through my shock. No, Wesley. Naomi's tone brooked no discussion. It's time for changes. My future is with this family. This is my real family. She gestured to her husband's clan with obvious pride, her face glowing with the kind of love and acceptance I remembered from her childhood. The same expression she used to get when I surprised her with ice cream, or stayed up late helping with homework. Except now it was directed at people who had known her for 2 years, while the man who raised her stood alone, excluded, dismissed, erased from the family portrait, like an unwanted shadow. Right. Marcus lowered his camera, clearly uncomfortable with the tension he had inadvertently caused. Other guests had stopped their conversations, sensing the unfolding drama. Whispers began to ripple through the elegantly dressed crowd like waves over expensive silk. I understand. The words came from somewhere deep inside me, forced out through a throat that felt crushed. Enjoy your pictures. I walked away from the group, from my daughter, from the life I thought we had built together. Each step felt like walking on quicksand, heavy and uncertain. The whispers followed me, curious and sympathetic and embarrassed, all at once. My assigned table waited in the corner, a single-place setting surrounded by empty chairs. The wedding coordinator had mentioned that other guests would join me later, distant relatives and family friends, but for now it was just me and the raw reality of my isolation. I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly unable to support the weight of what had just happened. The envelope in my pocket crinkled again, mocking me with its substantial weight. $25,000, the price I had paid to finance my own public humiliation. Behind me, Marcus resumed his photo session. I could hear the click of his camera, the soft instructions he gave for posing Randall's fondly around my daughter. Their laughter drifted through the space, warm and inclusive, and complete without me. Beautiful. Now lean slightly into Randall, Naomi. Perfect. Celeste, can you move just one step closer? Excellent. Every click of the camera captured moments I would never be a part of. Memories that would hang in their homes and albums forever. The official record of Naomi's new family. The people who mattered in her life now. I fixed my gaze on my hands. Calloused by 30 years of honest work, marked by countless small injuries, earned providing for a daughter who had just declared me irrelevant. These hands had built her dollhouse, taught her to tie her shoes, signed every check for her education and her dreams. Now they trembled slightly as the full weight of her rejection settled into my bones. The photo session continued behind me, bright voices of celebration, Randall's deep chuckle, Celeste's soft corrections, Wesley's confident responses, and beneath it all, Naomi's voice, musical and happy in a way I hadn't heard in years. She was happy, genuinely, completely happy, in a way she had never been with me, not since she had begun her ascent toward respectability. Her husband's family gave her something I never could. Social acceptance, financial security, the kind of approval that came from belonging to the right class. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking slightly as I checked my bank balance. The money was still there, waiting for tomorrow's transfer, $25,000 that would vanish from my account and enter the ballroom's coffers, paying for flowers, food, and music that celebrated my replacement. "Are you all right, sir? Can I get you a small coffee?" A young server had appeared at my table, her kind face showing genuine concern. She was probably Naomi's age, working hard to pay for college or support her own family, the kind of person my daughter used to be before she decided that working-class values weren't sophisticated enough for her new aspirations. "Fine," I managed to say. "Just taking it all in?" She nodded sympathetically and moved on, leaving me alone with the sound of celebration that surrounded my corner of silence. The photo session was ending. Marcus was thanking Randall's family for their patience and cooperation. I didn't turn around. I couldn't bear to see Naomi's beaming face, flushed with the satisfaction of having made her statement clear. She had chosen her side, drawn her line, declared her loyalties. Now, I would choose mine. The envelope in my pocket seemed to pulse with possibility. $25,000, my life savings, my security, my future comfort, all inside an envelope addressed to a daughter who had just publicly repudiated me. But the money hadn't been transferred yet. The check hadn't been cashed. The payment could still be reconsidered. I sat perfectly still while the wedding celebration continued. Around me, my mind beginning to calculate possibilities I had never considered before. Naomi had made her decision about family loyalty, about what mattered and who counted and where her heart belonged. Maybe it was time for me to make mine. The reception began with all the pomp that money could buy. A 12-piece orchestra began playing classical melodies that echoed off the ballroom's crystal chandeliers. Servers in immaculate uniforms circulated with silver trays, carrying hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per piece than I spent on lunch. I remained at my corner table, a silent observer of my own financial investment. Every detail around me bore a price tag I had memorized from endless invoices and contracts. Catering, $12,000. Flowers, $3,000. Orchestra, $4,000. Photography, $2,000. Venue rental, $4,000. Every expense carved from my retirement like pieces of my future, sacrificed for this moment of elegant celebration. "Your daughter looks absolutely radiant." An elderly woman at a nearby table leaned over with genuine warmth. "You must be so proud to give her such a beautiful wedding." I nodded slowly, watching Naomi glide across the dance floor in Randall's arms. The traditional father-daughter dance stolen and given to my replacement. Everyone gets what they deserve, the woman replied, missing the edge in my voice. Oh, how wonderful. Family is everything, isn't it? Some bonds are stronger than others, I replied, my eyes never leaving the dance floor. Randall twirled Naomi with grace, her wedding dress flowing around her like expensive cream. She laughed at something he whispered, the sound bright and musical, the way she used to laugh with me when she was little, before she learned that laughter with working-class fathers wasn't sophisticated enough for her aspirations. My phone vibrated against my leg, a bank notification, the automatic transfer reminder I had set up weeks ago. Wedding payment scheduled for tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. $25,000 to the Grand Metropolitan Ballroom, 24 hours. That's how long I had before my money irrevocably became theirs, before my sacrifice became permanent, before my humiliation was paid for in full. I pulled up my banking app with steady fingers. The balance stared back at me, $27,147. My entire liquid net worth, accumulated over decades of careful saving and overtime wages, would fall to $2,147 tomorrow. Enough for groceries and basic utilities for a few months, if I was careful. The dance ended to enthusiastic applause. Naomi embraced Randall with evident affection. Then she moved to dance with Wesley, while Celeste dabbed tears of joy from her eyes. A perfect family moment, documented by Marcus's camera feeds, financed by my emptying bank account. This must have cost a fortune. Another guest approached my table, their voice filled with admiration. You're incredibly generous. I looked at him. The stranger, who understood the value of the wedding better than my own daughter. It's educational. He chuckled, thinking I was making a joke about costly choices in wedding planning. If only he knew just how educational this experience was becoming, how clearly it illustrated the price of love, the cost of loyalty, the exact monetary value of 28 years of devoted fatherhood. The orchestra transitioned to dinner music as servers began presenting the first course. Herb-crusted salmon, I recalled from the menu selection. $7 per plate. $7 multiplied by 120 guests. Another $600 from my retirement served on china that cost more than my monthly car payment. I accepted my plate mechanically, unable to savor the expensive flavors. Around me, guests exclaimed over the quality of the food, the elegance of the presentation, the evident expense of the celebration. They understood that someone had paid dearly for this luxury. They simply assumed that someone was happy to do so. I remember when my daughter got married, an older woman across the table shared nostalgically. Such a special father-daughter bond. Nothing compares to that moment of giving her away. I cut my salmon into precise pieces, every movement controlled and deliberate. Some daughters prefer to give themselves away. She looked bewildered, but didn't pursue the comment, returning to her conversation about the beauty of the ceremony. I continued eating, continued observing, continued calculating. Naomi moved between the tables like a gracious hostess, accepting congratulations and compliments with practiced ease. She had grown into this role naturally, as if born to navigate social gatherings where champagne flowed and small talk sparkled with inside references and shared connections. When she reached tables near Randall's family section, her laughter grew more genuine, her gestures more animated. When she approached the working-class relatives and plant friends I had invited, her smile remained perfect, but it grew slightly strained, her conversations shorter and less engaged. She was editing her past in real time, graduating from one social class to another with the efficient brutality of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and who she had to discard to get it. My phone vibrated again, this time a text from my bank. Reminder: large transfer scheduled for tomorrow. Call customer service to cancel or modify. Cancel or modify. 3 words that held more power than any others in my vocabulary at this moment. 3 words that could transform this entire celebration from triumph to catastrophe in the space of one phone call. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, my reflection appearing in the black glass. 62 years old, gray-haired, wearing my best suit for my own daughter's rejection ceremony. I looked like what I was, an aging factory worker who had saved every penny to afford one moment of importance in his daughter's life. That moment had come and gone. Now I was just an expensive guest at my own execution. The dinner courses continued with clockwork precision. Soup, $5 per bowl. Salad, $6 per plate. Every bite represented hours of overtime, sacrificed weekends, small comforts denied. All so Naomi could impress people who would judge her by the elegance of her reception rather than by the love of her father. Such a lovely wedding, someone commented to their companion. The groom's family certainly knows how to celebrate properly. The groom's family, as if they had planned and paid for everything, as if their money had transformed the ballroom into this showcase of elegance and taste, as if I were simply a footnote in their celebration, a working-class relative tolerated out of pure formality. Marcus moved through the crowd, capturing spontaneous moments between courses. Happy guests, loving family, perfect celebration. His camera never turned toward my corner table, where the man who had made it all possible sat alone with his champagne untouched and his mounting fury. Celeste rose from her chair, moving toward the microphone with the confidence of someone accustomed to public speaking. The crowd hushed expectantly, sensing an important moment was approaching. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice began, ringing clearly through the decorated space, "I'd like to say a few words about our beautiful new daughter. Our daughter, not Arthur's daughter, marrying into our family, our daughter. As if Naomi had been born into their clan and raised in their world of privilege and proper connections." I put down my fork, my appetite completely gone. My hand moved unconsciously to the envelope in my pocket, my fingers tracing the outline of the check that would complete my financial sacrifice. But Celeste was still speaking, and something in her tone suggested this speech would deliver yet another blow, another reminder of my irrelevance in Naomi's new life. I focused on her words, bracing myself for whatever came next. The champagne in my glass had gone flat, its bubbles gone, like my illusions about family loyalty. Around me, the guests leaned in attentively, ready to witness another moment of eloquence from Randall's family. I waited, my hand still touching the envelope, and as Celeste prepared to deliver what I sensed would be the final insult to my decades of devoted fatherhood. Celeste's voice faded as she handed the microphone to Naomi with maternal pride. My daughter rose with grace, her champagne flute catching the light like a crystal beacon. The entire reception fell silent. 200 guests turned their attention toward the radiant bride. For one desperate moment, hope flickered in my chest. Perhaps this was my chance at redemption. The traditional daughter's speech, where she thanked her father for his love, his sacrifices, his unwavering support through 28 years of devoted parenthood. "Thank you all for sharing this perfect day with us," Naomi began, her voice confident and musical. "I want to acknowledge the most important people who made this possible." She paused, scanning the crowd with practiced poise. Her eyes passed over my table without recognition, landing instead on Randall and Celeste at the head table. I gripped my water glass. "Randall, you became the real father I needed, the one who showed me what paternal love should really be like. Her voice resonated through the silent room with devastating clarity. Unlike my biological father, you succeeded where well, let's just say you set the bar much higher. A soft laugh rippled through the crowd. Polite, understanding giggles from guests who thought they were witnessing charming honesty instead of calculated cruelty. My world collapsed in that single phrase. Real father. 28 years of bedtime stories reduced to a punchline. Decades of overtime shifts transformed into a comedic failure. Every sacrifice, every skipped vacation, every double work week to pay for her dreams, all dismissed with casual laughter from strangers, sipping champagne bought with my retirement. Randall stood up slowly, accepting the microphone with dignified grace. "My dear daughter," he said, the word daughter rolling off his tongue like a claim of ownership. "It has been my honor to guide you toward the happiness you deserve. You needed a father who truly understood your worth, your potential, your place in the world." More applause. Enthusiastic approval from people who perfectly understood the subtext. Working-class devotion couldn't compete with country club cultivation. Plant floor love was insufficient for someone with Naomi's refined aspirations. "Welcome to our real family, darling," Celeste added, her voice thick with emotion as she embraced my daughter. Real family. The words hammered inside my skull. Real father, real family, real life. One that didn't include the man who had raised her alone after her mother died, who had worked 60-hour weeks to pay for her wedding dress, who had emptied his savings to finance this elaborate celebration of his own replacement. I rose silently, my movement barely noticed, amid the continuing toasts and congratulations. No dramatic exit, no furious confrontation, just a man in his best suit, slipping out of a party that had transformed his love into a source of entertainment. The heavy restaurant doors muffled the celebration as I pushed through them. Behind me, the applause continued for my daughter's brave honesty about ascending to better parenthood. Ahead was the parking lot and the cool March night air that promised the clarity I couldn't find inside. My footsteps echoed on the marble floors as I walked away from 28 years of fatherhood, officially terminated by public vote and recorded by professional photographers who would preserve this moment in a wedding album forever. Real father. The phrase followed me into the night like a curse I had paid $25,000 to hear. The cool air hit my face as the restaurant doors closed behind me, cutting off the sound of the celebration like a heavy curtain. Streetlights illuminated the parking lot where the luxury vehicles stood glistening in neat rows, their polished surfaces reflecting my isolation back to me across the expensive chrome. My old car waited in the corner, humble and functional among its prestigious neighbors. I walked toward it slowly, my steps the only sound in the suddenly peaceful night. No applause, no laughter, no speeches declaring my obsolescence, just silence and the distant hum of highway traffic. Reaching my car, I leaned against the driver's side door and pulled out my wallet with shaky fingers. The leather had grown soft with age, worn smooth by decades of honest work. Behind my license, tucked carefully into the photo sleeve, was a picture I had carried for 18 years. Naomi, at 10 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck in a fierce hug. We were at the county fair, her face sticky with cotton candy, her eyes bright with pure joy. She had won a stuffed elephant at the ring toss and had declared me the best daddy in the whole wide world before falling asleep in my arms on the ride home. "Daddy, promise me you'll always be there for me," she had whispered that night as I tucked her in. "Promise you'll never leave me like Mommy did." My throat tightened as I looked at that innocent face, trying to reconcile it with the woman who had just publicly divorced me in front of 200 strangers. When had that trusting little girl transformed into someone capable of such calculated cruelty? The answer came with unwelcome clarity, gradually, methodically, over the 2 years since she had met Wesley. Small changes I had rationalized as maturity. Her embarrassment when I picked her up from dates in my old car. Her suggestions that I dress better when meeting her new friends. Her gentle corrections of my grammar, my manners, my working-class background that no longer suited her elevated aspirations. I had enabled every transformation. I paid for etiquette classes so she could better fit into Wesley's social circle. I bought her expensive clothes for country club events, where daughters of factory workers needed proper camouflage. I worked extra shifts to fund the gradual erasure of everything that connected her to me. Imani would have set boundaries, I whispered to the photograph, thinking of my late wife. She would have stopped this before it started. But Imani had been gone for 15 years, and I had raised Naomi with love instead of lessons, generosity instead of guidance. Every time she had pushed against her background, I had smoothed the path instead of teaching her to value where she came from. Looking up at the stars barely visible through the city glow, I made a decision that felt like waking up from a long sleep. Imani had trusted me to protect our daughter, but protection didn't mean enabling her worst impulses. Sometimes it meant teaching consequences. I folded the photograph carefully and returned it to my wallet. The little girl who had called me the best daddy in the whole wide world was gone, replaced by a woman who valued social status more than paternal devotion. But I was still here, still capable of teaching final lessons about respect and gratitude. My hand moved to my shirt pocket where the envelope waited, heavy with possibility. Under the harsh glare of the street lamp, I pulled the envelope from my pocket and extracted the check with ceremonial slowness. $25,000 written in my careful hand, signed with the same pen I had used to sign report cards and permission slips for museum field trips she would later learn to navigate as a sophisticated adult. The paper felt substantial between my fingers, real in a way that emotions were not. This wasn't hurt feelings or wounded pride. It was 6 months of 60-hour weeks condensed into a single negotiable instrument that could transform the celebration into catastrophe. With one phone call to my bank, I studied my own signature, remembering the moment I had signed it 3 weeks ago. I had felt proud then, sacrificial in the way fathers are supposed to be when they hand their daughters their dreams. Now that signature looked like evidence of my own foolishness, documentation of how thoroughly I had been played. $25,000, I whispered to the empty parking lot. 6 months of overtime, skipped vacations, every small comfort denied. The math was merciless in its clarity. $12,000 for catering that would feed people who had chuckled at my inadequacy. $3,000 for flowers that would wilt tomorrow, while my humiliation lived forever in professional photographs. $4,000 for music that had provided the soundtrack to my replacement ceremony. Every expense had seemed reasonable when I had imagined walking my daughter down the aisle, dancing the traditional father-daughter dance, being acknowledged as the man who had made her happiness possible. Instead, I had financed my own funeral as her father, complete with eulogies delivered by her new family. She wants to treat me like a stranger? I asked the cold Marcher air. Then I'll act like one. The decision crystallized with a startling peace. No anger, no vengeance, just the simple logic of cause and effect. Naomi had chosen to publicly sever our relationship. I was simply honoring her choice, implementing its natural consequences. I tore the check in half with deliberate precision, the sound of the paper ripping satisfying in its finality. One piece went into my left pocket, the other into my right. A commitment device that made reversal impossible without conscious deliberation. The release was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's expectations. No daughter to impress, no in-laws to satisfy, no social obligation to fulfill with money I couldn't afford to spend. I straightened my tie and smoothed my jacket, composing myself for the return performance. This wasn't about revenge or punishment, it was education. The final lesson in a curriculum that had begun 28 years ago, when I had promised to raise a good person. I promised to look after her, I said softly, remembering Imani's trust and my own naive good intentions, not enable her cruelty. Walking back toward the restaurant entrance, I felt calmer than I had all day. Let her show everyone who she really was when the bill arrived. Let Randall and Celeste prove their commitment to their real daughter when financial reality replaced social performance. I reached the heavy doors and paused, hand on the brass handle, taking one deep breath before re-entering the world I had just revolutionized. Behind those doors, a celebration continued, in my honor, or what had been my honor before I claimed it for myself. The broken check pieces rested in separate pockets, like a secret that would soon transform into the most expensive lesson in respect money could buy. The heavy doors closed behind me with a muffled finality, sealing out the cool night air and returning me to the warm bubble of celebration. The crystal chandeliers cast the same golden light. The orchestra played the same elegant melodies, and guests continued their animated conversations over champagne and expensive hors d'oeuvres. But everything had changed. Not the setting, but the observer. I walked into the reception with measured steps, no longer the anxious father seeking approval. The broken check pieces in my pockets felt like weapons, small paper bombs that would detonate when the timing was right. Every passing guest, every floral arrangement I noticed, every note from the 12-piece orchestra represented money that would soon become someone else's problem. My table waited exactly as I had left it, the untouched champagne flute still reflecting the light from above. I sat down slowly, arranging my napkin with deliberate care, and began to watch the celebration with new eyes. Naomi was dancing with her bridesmaids near the center of the room, her laughter bright and musical as she gestured to the elaborate floral arrangements. "Look at this venue. Wesley didn't spare any expense for our special day," she told her maid of honor, twirling in her $3,000 gown. "Well, technically, Daddy paid for everything, but Wesley chose all on the beautiful details. Technically, Daddy paid, as if my 6 months of overtime were a minor technical detail in her grand romantic story." At the head table, Wesley clinked glasses with Randall, both men wearing the satisfied expressions of successful negotiators. "Thank goodness your father covered the wedding costs," Wesley confided, loud enough for nearby tables to overhear. "It would have taken us a year to save for this, maybe 2. It's wonderful when simple people understand their place in supporting better things. Simple people." The phrase rolled off his tongue with casual dismissal, as if factory workers existed purely to finance the dreams of their social superiors. I gripped my water glass harder, feeling the torn paper crinkle in my pocket. "He must be very proud." An elderly guest at a neighboring table leaned toward me with genuine warmth. What a generous gift, giving them this perfect wedding. The venue, the flowers, everything is simply magnificent. "Everyone gets exactly what they deserve," I replied softly, my voice carrying nuances she couldn't interpret. She smiled and returned to her conversation, missing the hidden promise in my words. Around me, the celebration continued with costly momentum. Servers circulated with silver trays carrying $20 hors d'oeuvres. The photographer captured moments that would preserve this night forever in professional albums. The orchestra played requests that cost more per song than most people spent on entertainment in a month. Every detail had been meticulously planned and impeccably executed using my sacrifice, my retirement, my future security. The irony was almost beautiful in its symmetry. I was watching my own money celebrate my own replacement. Isn't it marvelous? Celeste approached my table, champagne flute in hand, her maternal satisfactions radiating like heat from an expensive fireplace. Naomi looks so happy. It's wonderful when everything comes together so perfectly. Perfectly, I nodded, checking my watch. 7 o'clock was approaching with mechanical inevitability. Timing is everything. She nodded sagely and moved on, unaware she was talking to a man counting down the seconds to detonation. I watched her rejoin Randall at their table, both of them gesturing proudly toward their new daughter, as if they had discovered her, instead of simply buying her loyalty with social status and empty promises. Across the room, Mr. Morales, the venue manager, moved between the tables with professional efficiency, checking details and coordinating service with his staff. Occasionally, his eyes swept toward my table, not with suspicion, but with the natural timing of a businessman who understood reception schedules. The moment of payment would arrive, as inevitable as gravity. I straightened my tie and smoothed my jacket, preparing for the performance of my life. 28 years of fatherhood had taught me patience, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Tonight I would teach my daughter about consequences, boundaries, and the difference between being generous and being used. The orchestra began another waltz as couples took the dance floor. Naomi danced with Wesley, their faces glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from having every dream financed by someone else's sweat. They moved together with practiced grace, a perfect couple celebrating their perfect wedding in their perfect world. In 15 minutes, perfection would meet reality. Mr. Morales appeared at the edge of my vision, leather folder in hand, approaching with the measured step of a man who had done this hundreds of times before. Mr. Arthur, pardon the interruption. Mr. Morales's voice held the professional courtesy of someone accustomed to handling financial transactions. He discreetly placed the leather folder on my table with practiced precision, its contents representing the culmination of months of planning and expense. It's time to settle the reception payment. Here is the final, itemized invoice. I opened the folder slowly, examining numbers I had memorized weeks ago. Catering, $12,000. Venue rental, $4,000. Floral arrangements, $3,000. Photography, $2,000. Music and entertainment, $4,000. Every line item represented hours of overtime. Weekend sacrifice, small comforts denied. The total figured at the bottom in bold numerals, $25,000. Naomi glided over from the dance floor, Wesley following at a respectful distance. Her face wore the confident glow of someone who had never doubted the outcome of any financial negotiation in her life. Daddy, you know our arrangement. Her tone was casual, almost dismissive, as if discussing a tip for the parking valet. Time to settle up the celebration. Everything looks perfect, doesn't it? She gestured around the decorated ballroom with proprietorial satisfaction, her $3,000 dress catching the light from the crystal chandeliers I had paid to illuminate. Behind her, Wesley nodded encouragingly, his relief at avoiding financial responsibility written clearly on his face. I closed the folder and looked at my daughter, this woman who had publicly declared me irrelevant only hours earlier. The transformation was complete, from devoted father to dispensable ATM, valued only for what I could provide. I've changed my mind, Naomi. The words dropped into a sudden silence, like stones in distilled water. Her confident smile flickered, but didn't vanish. as if she hadn't fully processed the impossible thing I had just said. I learned exactly who you really are today, I continued, my voice firm and measured. I don't pay for strangers' parties. What are you talking about? Her voice rose slightly, drawing the attention of nearby tables. We had an agreement. Everyone is watching. You made it abundantly clear that I am no longer your family, I countered, rising slowly to meet her eyes. So, handle this like the independent adult you claim to be. Wesley stepped forward, his face pale, with dawning comprehension. Sir, let's be reasonable about this. We can discuss the details in private, work out some sort of arrangement. Nothing to discuss. I kept my voice conversational, almost friendly. She chose her real family today. Let them pay, like real family does. The color drained from Naomi's face as the implication struck her. Around us, the conversation had hushed, as guests sensed a drama unfolding. The elegant bubble of celebration developed its first crack, a hairline fracture that would soon turn into a devastating break. But Daddy, the childish appellation slipped out in her panic. I'm not your daddy, remember? I picked up my water glass and took a measured sip. Randall is your real father now. I'm sure he'll be happy to prove his commitment to his real daughter. Mr. Morales shifted uncomfortably, his leather folder still open on the table, the unpaid invoice exposed like a wound. This wasn't how these conversations usually went. In his experience, wedding payments were routine affairs handled with gratitude and celebration, not a family war waged over itemized bills. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the back of an empty chair. This isn't... You can't just... What am I supposed to tell everyone? Tell them whatever you like, I countered. You're very good at making up creative stories when it suits you. Wesley looked desperately between his wife and me, clearly out of his element, in a crisis that threatened to shatter the perfect night he had assumed was guaranteed. There has to be some misunderstanding here. Surely we can... No misunderstanding, I interrupted. Everything is perfectly clear. You got the wedding you wanted from the family you chose. Now comes the bill. I watched my daughter's face cycle through emotions. Disbelief, anger, panic, and finally, the first hints of genuine fear. For 28 years, she had never doubted my support. She had never questioned my willingness to sacrifice anything for her happiness. That certainty was dying in real time, visible in her widening eyes. Naomi turned desperately toward the head table, where Randall and Celeste were sitting, their faces showing the first signs of concern as they noticed the disturbance at my table. Naomi's heels clicked rapidly against the marble floor as she ran toward her husband's family table, Wesley following close behind. I remained seated, watching the drama unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a carefully orchestrated experiment on human nature. Randall looked up from his conversation as his new daughter approached, his patrician features showing mild annoyance at her obvious distress. Celeste put down her champagne glass, her perfectly practiced smile slightly faltering. There's been a misunderstanding with my father, Naomi began, her voice carefully controlled despite the panic I could see growing behind her eyes. He's having second thoughts about the payment agreement, something about feeling unappreciated. She forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. You know how sentimental older people get. I'm sure we can resolve this. But in the meantime... She paused, clearly struggling with the words she never imagined having to say. Could you possibly help us with the reception payment, just temporarily, until we sort out this silly confusion? Randall's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the generous patriarch transforming into the calculating businessman. Well, son, he said, addressing Wesley, while pointedly ignoring Naomi's direct appeal. We've already committed quite a bit to your honeymoon arrangements. The European trip, the first-class accommodations. Finances are rather tight right now. Celeste nodded sympathetically, but her tone carried steel beneath the sweetness. Of course, we want to support you both, dears. But supporting you doesn't mean paying for everything. That's not how real families operate, is it? The irony of her words was not lost on me from across the room. Real families, indeed. Weasley's face flushed with shame and mounting desperation. But you said we were family now. You welcomed Naomi with so much love and generosity. Families help each other through unexpected crises. And we are family, dear boy, Celeste countered, patting his arm condescendingly. But we are not automatic funding sources. Surely you can handle your own financial obligations without expecting us to bail you out of every little difficulty. Randall straightened his expensive tie with practiced authority. The wedding arrangements were made between you and your father-in-law. We naturally assumed the competent adults had handled their responsibilities appropriately. I watched Naomi's face crumble as her new family revealed their true nature under the first sign of financial pressure. The loving, generous people who had embraced her so warmly were displaying their carefully hidden self-interest with surgical precision. The gift table, Naomi whispered urgently to Wesley, abandoning diplomacy for desperate pragmatism. We need to open the envelopes. Count everything. Maybe there's enough to cover at least a portion. Wesley nodded miserably and followed her to the elegantly decorated gift table, where envelopes and wrapped packages rested in careful arrangement. Under the curious glances of nearby guests, they began the humiliating process of tearing open wedding gifts to count the cash donations. This is from your co-workers, Wesley muttered, extracting bills from an envelope. $200. He moved to the next one. Your cousin Sarah, $150. The amounts added up slowly. 50 here, 100 there. Occasionally, a more generous 200 or 300 from closer relatives. Naomi's hands shook as she calculated the totals, her perfect wedding composure disintegrating with every opened envelope. Guests at nearby tables watched with uncomfortable fascination as the bride and groom conducted an impromptu audit of their own wedding gifts. How much do we have so far? She asked, her voice strained with repressed panic. Maybe 4,000, Wesley replied quietly. 5 at most. The photographer and the orchestra, we could probably cover those. But the catering and the venue... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Even with every envelope opened and every gift monetized, they faced a deficit that would leave significant debts unpaid and vendors unsatisfied. Mr. Morales appeared at their makeshift counting station, his professional patience beginning to show strain. I don't want to rush you, but we have other events scheduled. The kitchen staff is waiting to clean, and we need to settle accounts tonight. Naomi looked up at him with eyes that had learned what desperation felt like. The gift money scattered on the table told the mathematical story of their plight, endurous but insufficient, loving but inadequate, well-intentioned but ultimately useless against the reality of $25,000 in unpaid bills. She turned back toward my table, her gaze meeting mine across the elegant chaos of her perfect wedding reception. For the first time in years, possibly for the first time in her adult life, she was completely out of options, facing consequences without safety nets, experiencing what accountability really meant. I raised my water glass in a small private toast to the woman who had tried so hard to prove she didn't need her father. Now, she would discover exactly how much that independence cost. The gift envelopes lay scattered across the table like fallen leaves, their contents revealing the cruel mathematics of nuptial generosity. Naomi's hands trembled as she counted bills with mounting desperation, her perfect manicure smudged by desperate fingerprints on crumpled 20s and 50s. "This envelope from your college roommate. $60, Wesley muttered, his voice hollow with disbelief. "The one from my office colleagues, $125. He moved to the next with mechanical precision. "Great Aunt Marta. $50 in a card about finding happiness in the simple things." Simple things? The irony was not lost on me as I watched them audit their own celebration, reducing wedding wishes to currency that perpetually fell short of their desperate need. "How much total?" Naomi asked, her voice stripped of its former musical confidence. "Perhaps $7,800, Wesley replied, his accounting background lending unwanted precision to their humiliation. "Less than $8,000 total. $8,000. A generous sum that would have seemed miraculous to most young couples, but pathetically inadequate against the $25,000 obligation I had withdrawn. They could cover Marcus's photography fee, pay the musicians, settle the decoration costs, but the $12,000 catering bill loomed like an unpayable mountain of debt. Marcus Jones approached their impromptu accounting station with professional discretion. "Ma'am, I believe this covers my services completely." He accepted his payment with kind efficiency. "Your photographs will be ready by Friday. Congratulations again on your beautiful wedding." Beautiful wedding. The phrase hung in the air, like incense from a funeral service, as Marcus packed his gear and departed. One vendor satisfied. Others were still waiting with mounting impatience. "We could pay the orchestra," Wesley suggested faintly, clinging to any solution that felt like progress. "Pay them? And focus on the big problem." They managed to pay the musicians next, watching as their precious pile of gift money dwindled with each transaction, while the catering debt remained intact, unmoving, a financial rock blocking their path to celebration. Mr. Morales checked his watch with the practiced movement of someone accustomed to business schedules. "Ma'am, I need the catering payment resolved now. I have policies regarding outstanding balances, and my night crew is waiting to complete cleanup." Policies. The word carried a weight that social expectations couldn't match. Mr. Morales was not family to be charmed, nor friends to be persuaded. He was a businessman with operating costs and payroll obligations that existed independently of family drama or wedding day emotions. Naomi looked up from her pathetic pile of remaining bills, her face pale with the understanding that even her best efforts had failed. "We're still quite short. Perhaps we could arrange payments, a schedule, something manageable?" "My contracts specify full payment upon completion of service," Mr. Morales replied, his voice firm but not cruel. $12,000 was the agreed-upon amount. I need the agreed-upon payment. Desperate measures demanded desperate decisions. Naomi turned back toward my table, her pride crumbling like expensive makeup in the summer heat. This was not the confident woman who declared me irrelevant only hours before. This was someone learning what real helplessness felt like. "Daddy, please," her voice echoed through the room with humiliating volume. "I'm sorry for everything I said earlier. Can you cover just the catering? I'm begging you." Begging. The word she had never had to use in 28 years of my unconditional generosity. I looked up from my untouched champagne, meeting her desperate eyes with calm indifference. "No, Naomi," my voice cut through clearly without raising the volume. "You made your decision about family today. Learn to live with the consequences." Her face crumbled as the last door to a store slammed shut. Wesley attempted one final appeal, his financial training searching for angles that didn't exist. "Sir, surely we can come to an arrangement. Family helps family during tough times." "Exactly," I counter. letting the implications of the words sink in. Family helps family, but you made it very clear that we are no longer family. Mr. Morales cleared his throat, checking his watch with mounting impatience. You have 10 more minutes to resolve this payment issue. After that, I contact my security service for debt collection procedures. 10 minutes. The wedding reception had turned into a game show with a very expensive clock, ticking down to consequences that would make this night unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Mr. Morales's voice cut through the reception chatter like a dinner bell, commanding the immediate attention of every guest within earshot. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this interruption, but I have a business matter that requires immediate resolution. The orchestra stopped playing mid-song. Conversations died instantly. 200 faces turned toward the drama, unfolding around the gift table, where scattered envelopes and crumpled bills told the story of financial desperation. The bride currently owes $12,000 for catering services provided tonight, Mr. Morales announced with a professional clarity that made privacy impossible. If this matter is not resolved in 10 minutes, I will contact security services for assistance with debt collection. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Guests exchanged awkward glances, shifting in their seats as they realized they were witnessing something far beyond typical wedding drama. This was a business failure happening in real time, complete with specific dollar amounts and public ultimatums. Naomi's composure shattered like expensive crystal hitting marble floors. "Daddy?" The word exploded from her throat with enough force to rattle the chandelier crystals. "You are destroying me. This is your fault. You have ruined the most important day of my life." Her voice cracked on the last words, tears streaming down cheeks that had been professionally made up only hours before. The perfect bride had turned into a hysteric in white silk, screaming at her father, while 200 witnesses watched with horrified fascination. "I've never seen anything like this at a wedding reception," someone whispered at a nearby table, their shock evident despite attempts at discretion. Wesley grabbed his wife's shoulders, his face flushed with shame and panic. "Naomi, please calm down. Everyone is watching. Let's handle this quietly." "I don't care who's watching," Naomi shrieked, her voice rising to operatic levels. "Let everyone know what kind of selfish, cruel father abandons his daughter on her wedding day. Let them see exactly what Arthur Wallace is really like." She pointed at me with a trembling finger, her wedding gown rustling as she turned to address the room like a prosecutor, making final arguments to a jury of uncomfortable guests. "This man raised me for 28 years only to humiliate me when I needed him most. He promised to pay for everything and then changed his mind because his feelings were hurt. What kind of father does that to his own daughter?" The room remained frozen in awkward silence. Guests caught between sympathy for the bride's distress and the recognition that something more complex than simple paternal cruelty was unfolding. I rose slowly, straightening my tie with deliberate calm. When I spoke, my voice carried the measured authority of someone who had made peace with difficult decisions. "Now you understand what real consequences feel like, Naomi." I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, preparing for departure. "You declared me irrelevant. I am simply honoring your wishes." "You can't do this to me!" Her voice broke on the last word, hysteria replacing anger as the full weight of her plight crashed down. "I have nowhere else to go. No one else to ask." "Perhaps your real family will help you," I replied quietly, letting the phrase hang in the air like an unresolved musical note. Randall and Celeste remained conspicuously seated at their table, studying their champagne glasses with sudden intensity, making no move to intervene or assist in the crisis they had helped create with their earlier refusal to provide support. Walking toward the exit, I could hear Naomi's sobs reverberating off the crystal chandeliers, her perfect wedding dissolving into chaos behind me. 200 guests sat frozen in their seats, witnessing the complete destruction of the celebration they had hoped to fondly remember. The heavy restaurant doors closed behind me, muffling the sound of her continuing collapse. I crossed the parking lot toward my old car, each step taking me further away from 28 years of unilateral devotion and closer to a future defined by self-respect instead of endless giving. Behind me, the elegant facade of the ballroom contained the wreckage of a perfect celebration, where a woman was learning that actions have consequences and choices have costs that cannot be paid with tears or accusations. My old car started with the reliable rumble of 15 years of faithful service, a sound that had never seemed more welcoming than in this moment of complete transformation. I drove slowly out of the ballroom parking lot, watching the elegant venue shrink in my rearview mirror until it disappeared completely behind suburban trees and streetlights. The drive home took me through neighborhoods I had navigated thousands of times, but tonight they looked different, not because the landscape had changed, but because the man behind the wheel was no longer the same person who had driven this route just hours earlier. The capital city at night held a peaceful quality that contrasted sharply with the chaos I had left behind. Traffic lights cycled their colors with mechanical precision. Nighttime runners moved along the sidewalks with determined rhythm. Normal people living normal lives without the burden of ungrateful children or toxic relationships disguised as family obligations. 28 years I had spent trying to buy her love with sacrifices she had come to expect as entitlements. Every overtime shift worked to pay for her dreams. Every vacation I had skipped to finance her education. Every comfort I had denied myself to ensure she never went without anything important. Tonight, I had learned the difference between love and transaction, between gratitude and expectation, between being valued and being used. My modest house waited with the lights I had left on, a simple two-bedroom structure that had felt almost shabby compared to the venues where Naomi entertained her new social circle. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw it differently. Not a working-class limitation, but a sanctuary free from people who measured worth by price tags and social status. Inside, everything remained exactly as I had left it that afternoon. My comfortable reading chair, the television I had bought for retirement, photographs of genuinely happy moments scattered on side tables and windowsills. The house felt peaceful in a way I hadn't appreciated before, a stark contrast to the costly anxiety of the night. Imani's photograph rested on the mantelpiece where it had resided for 15 years. Her smile captured during a camping trip we had taken the summer before Naomi started school. She looked happy in that spontaneous photo, genuinely content with simple pleasures that had required no grand financial investment or social performance. I picked up the frame, studying her face with new understanding. I know you would have handled it better, Isa. You would have set boundaries years ago, before it got this bad. But I did what I had to do tonight. She chose her path. Settling into my favorite chair, I felt the tension of the night drain from my shoulders like water from a full tub. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about someone else's expectations or demands. No daughter requiring financial rescue, no in-laws demanding social performance, no obligations beyond my own comfort and well-being. Tomorrow I would wake up with $25,000 still in my account. Money that could buy genuine comfort instead of temporary approval from people who had never valued the man who earned it. I could travel if I wished, upgrade my house, pursue hobbies I had abandoned over decades of raising and working to finance other people's dreams. 28 years I spent trying to buy her love, I told Imani's photograph. Tonight, I learned you can't buy respect. Some people only understand consequences. The house was silent, except for the familiar sounds of home. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the steady tick of the grandfather clock, the distant drone of highway traffic. These were the sounds of peace, of a life free from drama, demands, and disappointments, disguised as filial relationships. I thought of Naomi, likely still at the venue, dealing with the fallout of her choices. Part of me wondered how she would resolve the catering debt, whether Randall and Celeste would finally step forward to help their real daughter, or whether she would learn to navigate financial consequences without a father to rescue her. But mostly, I felt relief. Clean, pure relief at being free from relationships built on what I could provide instead of who I was. Tonight had been costly, in ways that had nothing to do with money. The cost of finally understanding that enabling is not loving, that boundaries are not cruelty, that self-respect sometimes requires hard decisions. I placed Imani's photograph face down on the side table, a symbolic closing of that chapter of my life, where I defined myself through other people's needs and expectations. Tomorrow would begin differently, focused on a man who had earned the right to live for himself after decades of living for others. Rising from my chair, I looked toward the bedroom where my own bed waited, not the guest room where I had retreated for years of tiptoeing around my daughter's moods and demands, but my own space where I could rest without worrying about someone else's financial crises or social embarrassments. The first night of my new independent life stretched before me with quiet promise. Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one. With love.